The only sounds in the small wooden cabin on Huangshan Mountain were the steady patter of rain and the soft rustle of me turning a page. I was here, over 400 kilometers from Shanghai, studying a batch of recently unearthed ancient manuscripts. There was no Wi-Fi, and the phone signal was sporadic. It was a perfect isolation, ideal conditions for my work, the restoration of antiquities. I, Liang Wei, lived for things like this, the quietude of the past, the silent stories hidden in every crack of pottery, every faded stroke of ink on Xuan paper. My phone vibrated once, a single WeChat message finally breaking through the weak signal. It was from Xiao Li, my assistant at the museum. No text, just a link. I frowned. Xiao Li knew I disliked being disturbed while working. This had to be important. I moved to the only corner of the room with a faint signal bar, waiting patiently for the page to load. The loading circle spun endlessly. Then the screen lit up. It was a live stream, a lavish stage, brilliant lights, and a giant ML Gallery logo in the background. My wife's gallery, Mei Ling's. The launch of her new digital art collection. I sighed, about to close it. I never understood the contemporary art she championed. It was too loud, too flashy, a complete contrast to my world. But then I saw her. Mei Ling was stunning in a deep red evening gown, her hair in an elegant updo, wearing the radiant smile that so often graced business magazines. Standing beside her, with a possessively placed hand on her waist, was Gao Qiang, the tech tycoon, the main investor in her gallery. I had met him a few times, a man with a polished smile and empty eyes. I never liked him. Thank you all for being here today. Mei Ling's voice rang out through the phone's speaker, clear and confident. She was born for the spotlight. Today is a special day, not just because we are launching a new era for art, but also because it is time to start a new chapter in my life. I felt a chill run down my spine. Mei Ling took a deep breath, looking directly into the camera, as if she were staring right at me. As many of you know, my marriage to Liang Wei, a respected expert, has come to its end. We have decided to go our separate ways. A divorce announcement via Livestream. How very her style. But I had anticipated this. For the past 6 months, the distance between us was no longer measured in kilometers, but in entire universes. Her late nights, her sudden business trips, the new password on her phone, the scent of unfamiliar perfume on her coat. I was not a fool. I was just a quiet man. But what she said next was what made the blood in my veins run cold. However, she said, her voice beginning to tremble with feigned emotion, her eyes welling with tears, a tragedy has occurred. A few days ago, during a research trip in the remote mountains, my husband Liang Wei unfortunately met with an accident and passed away. The room fell silent. So did I. I stared at the screen, at the perfectly acted grief on the face of the woman I had been married to for 10 years. Gao Qiang wrapped an arm around her shoulder in a gesture of comfort. He dedicated his entire life to preserving heritage, Mei Ling continued, her voice choked with sobs. And to honor his memory, as the sole legal heir to his estate and the priceless collection of antiquities of the Liang family, I have decided to bring his legacy to the world. The large screen behind her changed. Images of the artifacts in my study appeared. The Yuan dynasty blue and white porcelain vase, the landscape painting by Shitao, my grandfather's jade seal. They were all there. The entire collection will be auctioned at a special international event, co-hosted by ML Gallery and Mr. Gao Qiang's corporation, she announced. All proceeds will be used to establish the Liang Wei Heritage Fund to support young artists. Thunderous applause erupted from the crowd. Journalists' flashes went off like lightning. I stood there, in my cabin in the rain, a living man who had just heard the news of his own death. I tried to open my banking app. Account frozen. I tried to call my corporate lawyer. The number you have dialed. I knew what had happened. A forged death certificate. A doctored will. A perfect plan. In just 10 minutes, I had lost my wife, my name, my fortune, and my very existence. I had been erased. From a respected restorer of antiquities, I had become a ghost. Mei Ling and Gao Qiang had calculated everything. They knew I was in a remote, unreachable location. They knew I was a private man with few friends and little social life. Who would look for a man no one even knew was missing? They thought they had won. They thought they had taken everything. They had underestimated Mei Ling's boring, outdated husband. They had forgotten what my profession was. I don't just restore broken things. I understand their structure. I know how they were made. And I also know how to create replicas so perfect they are indistinguishable from the real thing. I did not panic. The initial shock gave way to a cold calm. This was not a fight about love or betrayal. This was a fight to reclaim my existence. And in the world of antiques and buried secrets, I was an expert. I deleted the link, deleted Xiao Li's message. I took the SIM card out of my phone and snapped it in two. I looked around the room, packing a few essentials into an old backpack. I could not go back to Shanghai. Not as Liang Wei, at least. Liang Wei was dead. It was time for someone else to be born. I opened the door and stepped out into the rain. The night was dark and cold, but in my mind, a plan was already forming, as clear and sharp as the crazed glaze on an ancient vase. They had started this war with a grand spectacle. I would end it in silence. The journey away from Huangshan was harder than I anticipated, not because of the rugged terrain, but because I was a man who did not exist. My ID card was now linked to a dead person. My bank account was a useless string of zeros. I only had a small amount of cash in my wallet, enough to survive, but not enough to draw attention. I walked 15 kilometers to the nearest town, my face hidden behind a cap and a mask. Every time I passed a police station, I felt a cold prickle on my skin. If my papers were checked, it would all be over before it even began. A man carrying a dead person's ID. Best case, I'd be treated as a petty thief. Worst case, I would be entered into a system from which proving I was myself would be nearly impossible. I boarded a long-distance bus, paid in cash, chose the last seat in the corner, and pulled my cap down to cover most of my face. The bus headed south, not to Shanghai. Returning there now would be suicide. Shanghai was Mei Ling's stage, the place where all eyes were on my legacy. I needed a hiding place, somewhere big enough to blend in and discreet enough to operate from. I chose Guangzhou. Throughout the 2-day journey, I didn't speak a word. I observed. I listened. The world carried on as if I had never existed. On the television screens at rest stops, the story of the tragedy of expert Liang Wei and the noble act of his widow Mei Ling was mentioned a few times on entertainment news segments. They had crafted a perfect narrative, a dedicated husband, a grieving wife turning her pain into charity. Who would ever doubt such a beautiful story? Upon arriving in Guangzhou, I found a small guest house in an old alley, the kind of place that didn't ask too many questions as long as you paid in cash. The room was damp and smelled of mildew, but it was safe. The first thing I did was buy a cheap phone and a prepaid SIM card registered under someone else's name, a service easily found in the city's complex street markets. Now, I needed an ally, just one. In my world, trust was a luxury. I went through a mental list, eliminating name after name. Friends? They would panic and call the police. Colleagues? They respected the late Liang Wei and wouldn't believe a ghost. Family? I had none left. There was only one person. A name from the past. A connection to my father, Mrs. Zhang. A retired lawyer who had been my family's legal counsel for decades. She wasn't just a lawyer. She was a fighter, Mrs. Zhang was in her 70s, but her mind was sharper than any young lawyer I knew. Most importantly, she understood the true value of the Liang family collection, and she despised liars. Finding her number wasn't difficult. She still lived in her old house in Shanghai's French concession. But calling her was a gamble. I needed a secure line of communication. I spent an entire day in various internet cafes, using public networks and encryption software to send a single email. Subject: a piece of porcelain for appraisal. Content: Dear Mrs. Zhang, I am the son of an old friend. I have a Yongle-era teapot that I would like you to look at. It has a very small crack on the handle, only visible to a discerning eye. My father used to say that only you had the knowledge to assess its true value. I will call you at 9 p.m. tomorrow from an unknown number. It was a code. The Yongle teapot was my father's most cherished piece. The crack on the handle was a secret known to only 3 people: my father, myself, and Mrs. Zhang, who had helped him acquire it at a London auction 30 years ago. Anyone else reading the email would see a normal request, but Mrs. Zhang would understand. At exactly 9 p.m. the next evening, I sat in my rented room, my heart beating faster than usual. I dialed the number. It rang 3 times. A deep, clear voice answered. Hello? Mrs. Zhang, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. The crack on the teapot, it's still there. The other end of the line was silent for about 5 seconds. I could hear her breathing. It was the longest 5 seconds of my life. Would she believe me? Or would she think this was a cruel prank? Wei, her voice trembled, not with fear, but with shock. Is that really you? It's me, I exhaled. I'm still alive. My God, she whispered. I saw the news. I sent flowers. Those bastards. Her voice suddenly hardened, turning cold as steel. The momentary vulnerability was gone. Lawyer Zhang was back. Where are you? Are you safe? I'm safe. I'm not in Shanghai. I can't say where I am. Good, she said. Don't say. Don't trust anyone. They've declared you dead. That means they won't hesitate to make it a reality if you show up. What do you need from me? I need a fighter, I said. Mei Ling and Gao Chang have taken everything, but they've made one mistake. They think they're holding a treasure, but they don't know its true value. What do you mean? I took a deep breath. It was time to reveal my first trump card, a secret that not even Mei Ling, my wife, had ever known. Mrs. Zhang, the collection that Mei Ling has in her possession, they are all fakes. Silence descended again. This time it wasn't the silence of disbelief, but of utter astonishment, of someone just realizing the true scale of the game being played. My boy, Mrs. Zhang finally said, her voice filled with admiration. Your father would be so proud. Tell me the plan. The ghost's first call was over. An alliance was formed. The game had begun. They are all fakes. My statement hung in the silent space between me and Mrs. Zhang. I could picture her face, her sharp eyes narrowed behind her reading glasses, her lawyer's mind analyzing every angle of this shocking confession. Explain, she said flatly. It was a contingency plan. Started 15 years ago, right after my father passed away, I began. My father left me the collection with one instruction. The value of these things isn't in money, but in the history they carry. Protect that history. Don't let it fall into the hands of those who only see zeros. I soon realized the art world was full of such people. Investors, dealers who only saw them as assets. I paused, remembering the long hours spent in the secret workshop in the basement of our old family home, a place not even Mei Ling had ever entered. So, I did what I do best. I created replicas. Not ordinary replicas. I spent years studying the techniques of each era, from the way glaze was mixed for Song Dynasty ceramics, to how ink was ground by Ming Dynasty masters, to the type of Xuan paper used in the late Qing Dynasty. Every piece in the collection known to the public has a perfect twin. How perfect? Mrs. Zhang asked, her voice skeptical. Perfect enough to fool 99% of the experts in the world, I stated confidently. I added microscopic details, personal signatures that only I would know. An almost invisible extra brushstroke in the landscape painting. A tiny air bubble located in an unusual spot under the glaze of the porcelain vase. A special adhesive, only detectable under a specific wavelength of ultraviolet light, used to repair a chip on the jade seal. They are my signatures, perfectly hidden. I continued. The real collection is stored in a safe place. A bank vault in Switzerland, under a different name. The items Mei Ling is displaying and preparing to auction. They are my own works of art. The greatest legacy of a master forger. Mrs. Zhang let out a dry, amused laugh. Wei, you're not just your father's heir. You are far more cunning than he ever was. So, Mei Ling and Gao Chang are preparing for the biggest art fraud auction in Asian history without even knowing it? Precisely, I said. And that will be our stage. What's your plan? Stop the auction? Expose them for fraud? No, I replied immediately. If we do that, they'll just be penalized for selling fakes. They could easily deny it, blame the previous appraisers. They'll claim they were victims too. And most importantly, I would still be a dead man. My plan is not to stop the auction. My plan is to let it happen. Mrs. Zhang's silence this time was one of agreement. She understood. We will let them walk right into the trap they've set, I continued, my voice growing more determined. They want a grand international event? We'll give it to them. They want the world's attention? Wonderful. We will turn that auction into a public trial. A trial where I am the evidence, the prosecutor, and the judge. But how? Mrs. Zhang asked. You can't show up. You're a ghost. A ghost can do many things, I said. Phase 1. Sow doubt. The art world is built on reputation and trust. We will erode both. Mrs. Zhang, I need you. You have old connections in the legal and financial worlds. I need you to quietly investigate Gao Chang. He can't be as clean as he looks. Find his shady deals, disgruntled former partners, anything that can be used as leverage. Leave that to me, Mrs. Zhang said firmly. My part, I went on, is to attack from the expert's angle. I will use my knowledge. I'll create virtual identities, join the most prestigious antique collector forums. I'll write insightful analyses, pointing out minor anomalies in the high-resolution photos of the collection that Mei Ling's gallery will surely publish. I won't say they're fakes. I'll just ask questions. Why is the shade of the glaze on this vase slightly different from excavated pieces of the same period? The brushwork in the bottom right corner of this painting seems a bit unnatural. Could it be from a past failed restoration? I will plant seeds of doubt in the minds of the most discerning collectors and experts. Psychological warfare, Mrs. Zhang noted. Exactly. We won't attack head-on. We'll create a dense fog of uncertainty around the auction. Make potential buyers hesitate. Make the auction houses question their own reputation. We will turn Mei Ling and Gao Chang's treasure into a hot potato. The more they try to promote it, the more the doubt will spread. I paused, looking out the window of my shabby guesthouse room. Outside was a foreign city, but in my mind, the battlefield was clearly drawn. They made me an invisible man, I said, my voice growing cold. So, I will use that very invisibility to set a trap they can never see, until it's far too late. The secret of the replicas was no longer a defense mechanism. It had become my sharpest weapon. The life of a ghost began. By day, I was an anonymous man in Guangzhou, living on cash and avoiding all security cameras. But by night, in the dim glow of a laptop screen at a deserted internet cafe, I became many different people. I was Old Man Mo, an anonymous scholar on China's largest antiquities forum. I was Jedi88, a collector based in Singapore on an international auction website. I was Beijing Scholar, a PhD student working on a dissertation on Yuan Dynasty ceramics. Each identity had a carefully constructed backstory, a unique writing style, and a specific area of expertise. The campaign began when ML Gallery released the first promotional photos for the Liangwei Legacy auction. The photos were professional, high resolution, showcasing the beauty of each artifact. To the average person, they were perfect. To me, they were a treasure trove of intentionally placed flaws. I started with the blue and white porcelain vase. Under the pseudonym Old Man Mo, I posted a long, polite, and highly academic analysis. I praised the overall beauty of the vase, but then began to ask expert questions. However, there is a small detail that troubles this old man, I wrote. The cobalt blue in the dragon motif has a slightly purplish hue, a characteristic often seen in Jingdezhen kilns in the late Yuan period, but very rare in the Middle period, which is when this vase is believed to have been made. Is there any possibility that its date has been misidentified? Or is this a unique, unrecorded variation? I look forward to hearing the opinions of other experts. I didn't say it was a fake, I just planted a seed of doubt. My post immediately garnered attention. Other experts began to join the debate. Some agreed with my observation, others refuted it. But the important thing was, the discussion had begun. The vase's name was now linked with the word questionable. Next, I targeted the landscape painting by Shatao. As Jedi88, I commented on the Instagram page of a famous auction house that had reshared the painting's image. A magnificent piece, but has anyone noticed the seal in the bottom left corner? The carving of the character Shi seems a bit shallow compared to his authenticated works at the Palace Museum. It might just be the angle of the photo, but I'd be very curious to see a more detailed close-up. Again, a casual question, a harmless curiosity. But it was enough to make discerning eyes narrow. Shallow carving, those two words started to spread in the private chat groups of wealthy collectors. I worked methodically, just as I would when restoring an antique. One piece a day, each with a different line of questioning. I never attacked directly. I merely suggested, guided the discussion, and let the community do the rest. I cited academic papers, compared with images of museum pieces, used the correct professional terminology. I built an unshakable reputation for my virtual identities. Meanwhile, in Shanghai, Mrs. Zhang also began her work. She called me once a week, from a public phone, at a prearranged time. Gao Chang is not just a tech investor, she reported during one call. He has a history of venture investments in failing companies, which he then somehow acquires for a pittance and sells off their core assets. He has many enemies. I found one, a former CFO he forced out. He says Gao Chang is a master of cooking the books. Good information, I said, but we won't use it yet. Let's save it for the right moment. Mrs. Zhang also used her connections to spread whispers in financial and legal circles. Have you heard about the ML Gallery auction? It's strange, I heard the provenance of a few pieces is a bit problematic. She would say this to a friend at a major bank, who would then tell a wealthy client considering bidding. The fog was thickening. I could feel it through the online reactions. Mei Ling's gallery started having to answer questions from the press. They produced appraisal certificates from reputable experts who, of course, had been fooled by my perfect replicas. But every time they tried to quell one rumor, a new question would arise from another corner of the internet, from another anonymous scholar. Mei Ling and Gao Qiang, once in a position of heroism, were now on the defensive. In an online interview, I saw the tension flash across Mei Ling's smile when a journalist asked about the academic debates surrounding the collection. "We have absolute confidence in the authenticity of the artifacts," she replied, her voice a little too high. "These are just the baseless speculations of jealous people hiding behind keyboards." She had taken the bait. She had called us jealous people. That only added fuel to the fire, making the online community even more curious. I sat in the internet cafe, read her comment, and smiled. She was fighting ghosts, enemies she couldn't see, couldn't identify. She was trying to put out a fire, not knowing that I was the one continuously adding new kindling from all over the world. Phase 1 was a success. The foundation of trust had been shaken. Now it was time for Phase 2, to launch a more targeted strike, one that would force them to make a mistake. The ripples I created eventually grew into a hidden storm. I watched it unfold through news articles, social media posts, and my weekly calls with Mrs. Zhang. The reaction of Mei Ling and Gao Qiang was like a play in several acts, and I was the only audience member who knew the script. Act 1. Arrogant Denial. Initially, they ignored the whispers. The ML Gallery website continued to post stunning photos and flowery descriptions of the priceless cultural heritage. Gao Qiang, in a speech at a tech conference, laughed off the online experts and declared that innovation always meets with skepticism from conservatives. They believed their reputation and power were enough to silence any opposition. They were wrong. Act 2. Damage control. When serious inquiries from reputable collectors and news agencies started pouring in, they could no longer ignore them. They held a press conference. Mei Ling, dressed in a formal black outfit, still looked grieving but with an added layer of determination. "We are deeply saddened that an act to commemorate my husband has been sullied by baseless rumors," she said, her voice full of emotion. "To put an end to all doubt, we have invited an independent appraisal committee from Beijing to reevaluate the entire collection." It was a smart move, but I had anticipated it. These experts, no matter how prestigious, would only see what was visible to the naked eye. They would check the material, the period, the style. They wouldn't look for a tiny, misplaced air bubble or an extra brushstroke only visible when compared to the original that only I possessed. Their appraisal result, as I predicted, was that all artifacts are genuine, of exceptionally high historical and artistic value. Mei Ling and Gao Qiang celebrated this as a vindication. They publicized the appraisal results loudly, treating it as the final proof. But in the collecting world, once doubt is sown, it doesn't easily disappear. A piece of paper might convince the mind, but it cannot dispel the unease in the hearts of savvy investors. Act 3. Panic and cracks. This was the most interesting phase. Mrs. Zhang informed me there were signs of a rift between the two hunters. "A source at the bank told me Gao Qiang is trying to rush the auction," she said over the phone. "He wants to sell the goods and get the money as soon as possible, before any more problems arise. He's putting pressure on Mei Ling." I could picture the scene. Gao Qiang, the pragmatic businessman, was losing his patience. To him, the collection was just an investment, a way to launder money or make a huge profit. These annoying academic debates were delaying and devaluing his product. Mei Ling, on the other hand, was bound by the narrative she had created. She had to play the part of a grieving widow protecting her husband's legacy. A hasty sell-off of the collection would look very suspicious. She wanted fame, he just wanted money. A conflict of interest was beginning to emerge. I decided to deepen that crack. I changed my tactics. Instead of just questioning authenticity, I began to attack the provenance, the history of ownership of the pieces. Under a new pseudonym, The Historian, I wrote a long blog post analyzing the history of my grandfather's jade seal. According to the published Liang family records, I wrote, "This seal was acquired from a collector in Paris in the 1982. However, according to records from Sotheby's in London, an almost identical seal was sold to an anonymous buyer at the same time. The description from Sotheby's is much more detailed, while the Paris record is quite vague. Is it possible that the Liang family unknowingly purchased a high-quality copy 30 years ago? This was a vicious blow. It not only questioned the artifact, but also questioned the knowledge and eye of the Liang family itself, directly attacking the pride of the late expert Liang Wei. This move truly angered Mei Ling. Mrs. Jiang recounted that a friend of hers attended a dinner party and overheard Mei Ling complaining angrily. "They are not just attacking me, they are insulting my deceased husband. It's unbelievable." She was being cornered. To protect her story, she had to appear even more respectful of my legacy, which further conflicted with Gao Qiang's desire for a quick sale. I could see their next move. To quell all rumors and demonstrate absolute confidence, they would do something bold. They wouldn't back down. They would raise the stakes. And just as I predicted, a week later, ML Gallery made a shocking announcement. In response to the immense interest from the international community and to ensure the utmost transparency, the Liangwei Legacy Auction will be moved to Hong Kong, the art auction capital of Asia. The event will be hosted by the prestigious auction house, Christie's. They had put themselves on a bigger, riskier stage. They thought that partnering with a reputable name like Christie's would be a shield. But they didn't know that the bigger the stage and the brighter the lights, the more painful their fall would be. They had brought the fight to my doorstep, Hong Kong. A place where I had connections, resources they could never have imagined. "Mrs. Jiang," I said in our next call, "it's time for me to move. Prepare for phase 2. The whispers and anonymous analyses had done their job, creating a fog of uncertainty, but fog can lift. I needed something tangible, a push strong enough to turn suspicion into a real investigation from the insiders. It was time to take a calculated risk. My target was Dr. Evelyn Reed, the head of the Asian Ceramics and Works of Art Department at Christie's in Hong Kong. She was a notoriously tough British scholar, a woman who believed in science more than in stories. Her reputation was everything. She would never let Christie's name be damaged by a scandal. She was the gatekeeper I needed to convince. But I couldn't contact her directly. An email from Old Man Mo would be ignored. I needed an intermediary, someone with enough credibility that she would have to listen. And I knew exactly who that was. Professor Chen, my old mentor at Peking University. One of the few people who truly understood the level of my skill. He was retired, living a reclusive life, and most importantly, he and Evelyn Reed were old friends who often exchanged academic correspondence. This was the riskiest part of the plan. I had to contact Professor Chen, which could expose my identity. I couldn't use email or phone. I had to use an older method. From Guangzhou, I sent a package to his private address in Beijing. Inside, there was no letter, no note, just a small shard of broken pottery, carefully wrapped in velvet cloth. It was a shard from a Song Dynasty bowl that the professor and I had restored together when I was a student. That project had taken 6 months, and there was a detail that only the two of us knew. To mend an extremely fine hairline crack, I had developed a special adhesive, a mixture of tree resin and bone powder, a formula I had invented myself. The adhesive was invisible to the naked eye, but it would emit a faint green fluorescence under ultraviolet light at a precise wavelength of 365 nanometers. I trusted his memory and his sharp eye. An anonymous gift, a fragment from the past. He would understand. I included in the package a small professional-grade UV flashlight. 3 days later, I received an email in one of my virtual inboxes. It came from a strange address, with no subject and no content. Only one attachment. It was a photo. The photo showed the pottery shard glowing green under the UV light. He had received the message. Now it was time for the second message. I replied to that email, still without a word. My email contained only a link to Old Man Mo's analysis of the blue and white vase from Mei Ling's collection, and a line of GPS coordinates. The coordinates of an old tea house in Beijing's ancient quarter, for 3 p.m. the day after tomorrow. Meeting him was a huge risk, but I had to do it. I took the night train to Beijing, using a set of fake documents that Mrs. Jiang had arranged through an old contact. I arrived at the tea house half an hour early, chose a secluded corner, and watched people come and go. At exactly 3 p.m., the familiar figure of Professor Chen appeared. He had aged considerably, his hair was completely white, but his posture was still straight. He sat down opposite me without a word. He just looked at me, his eyes filled with astonishment, grief, and then, understanding. "I thought you were," he began, his voice hoarse. "I know," I interrupted. "I'm sorry for worrying you, but I had no other choice." I told him everything, concisely and to the point. About the live stream, the fake death certificate, Mei Ling and Gao Chang's conspiracy, and the secret of the replicas. He listened intently, his thin fingers tapping lightly on the table. When I finished, he was silent for a long time, looking out the window. "Mei Ling, that girl, I never trusted her, he said. Her ambition was too great. But to this extent. I need your help, Professor, I said. Not as Liang Wei, but as a former student seeking academic advice. I want you to send an email to Evelyn Reed. I handed him a USB drive. On this is a more detailed analysis of the blue and white vase, not just the glaze color. I've analyzed the density of the iron particles in the glaze based on its sheen in high-resolution photos and compared it with data from excavated shards. The results show an anomaly. It's too perfect, too uniform. As if it were made in a computer-controlled kiln, not a wood-fired kiln from the Yuan dynasty. You want me to send this to Evelyn? Yes, as a personal inquiry. Say that you happened to read the online debates and became curious, so you did your own analysis. Ask for her opinion. Skepticism from someone like you will carry more weight than 1,000 old man Moses. It will force Evelyn to conduct her own thorough examination, not just rely on the appraisal committee's report. Professor Chen looked at me. This is a dangerous thing. For you and for my reputation. I know, I said, but it's the only way, to get a true expert involved, someone who cannot be bought. He nodded slowly. For the honor of your late father, and for the truth, I will do it. The meeting was over. I left first, disappearing into the crowded Beijing street. The risk had been taken. The seed had been planted in the right soil. Now, I just had to wait and see if it would sprout. A week later, Mrs. Zhang called me with important news. Christie's just released a statement, she said. They will be conducting a series of additional technical examinations on the collection using advanced spectroscopic and X-ray analysis. The auction date might be postponed by a week. I smiled. Evelyn Reed had taken action. The machine was now in motion. Christie's announcement of additional technical examinations was a double-edged sword. On one hand, it confirmed that my doubts had reached the right ears. Evelyn Reed was on the case. On the other hand, it also alerted Mei Ling and Gao Chang that there was a real threat. They wouldn't sit idle. Mrs. Zhang confirmed this. Gao Chang is furious. He flew to Hong Kong to pressure Christie's. He claims this is an insult, a breach of contract. He's threatening to sue. He won't sue, I said. A lawsuit would bring everything to light, which is the last thing he wants. This is just a bluff, but it means our time is running out. I couldn't wait for the results of Christie's analysis. No matter how advanced their technology was, the signatures I left on the replicas were not things that could be easily detected. It was very likely the final result would still be inconclusive. I needed to be there. I had to be the one to expose it all. It was time to move to Hong Kong. This journey was far more complicated than the trip to Beijing. Hong Kong was an international financial hub with tight security. Entering with fake documents was extremely risky. I needed a different plan. Mrs. Zhang, with her incredible network, found a way. There's a fishing boat owner in Shenzhen, a man who owes our family a debt from long ago. He can take you across at night. It won't be comfortable, but it will be safe. 2 days later, I was at a small pier in Shenzhen. That night, under a dim moon, I boarded an old fishing boat, thick with the smell of diesel and dried fish. The journey lasted several hours, rocking on the dark waves of Deep Bay. I was not Liang Wei, the respected restoration expert. I was a stowaway, a ghost adrift in the darkness. When the boat docked at a remote bay in the New Territories, a man was waiting. He was Ah Lik, one of Mrs. Zhang's contacts in Hong Kong, a retired private investigator. He took me to a small service apartment in Kowloon, an anonymous place among millions of people. Mrs. Zhang has arranged everything, Ah Lik said, handing me a briefcase. Inside is a new set of documents, under the identity of a Singaporean businessman named Li Yongxin. Passport, Idaho card, prepaid credit cards, enough to pass routine checks. There's also an invitation to the auction. I opened the invitation. It was printed on high-quality paper, with the logos of Christie's and ML Gallery. Mr. Li Yongxin, I had a new identity. What's the situation at Christie's? I asked. Tense, Ah Lik replied. The examinations are ongoing. Rumors are flying. A few major potential buyers have pulled out. Gao Chang and Mei Ling are at the Peninsula Hotel, and they are not happy. They're using every connection they have to force Christie's to proceed with the auction as planned. I had a few days before the auction. I couldn't sit still. I needed to see things for myself. Under the guise of Li Yongxin, a wealthy collector, I went to the Christie's exhibition. My heart pounded as I stood before the glass cases, looking at my spiritual children. The porcelain vase, the painting, the jade seal. They were on display under brilliant lights, beautiful and utterly fake. I saw Mei Ling there, talking to a group of potential clients. She looked thinner, her smile seemed strained, but she maintained her professional demeanor. Our eyes met for a fleeting moment. Of course, she didn't recognize me. I was just a strange face in the crowd. But in that instant, I saw something in her eyes. Not grief, but anxiety. I also saw Evelyn Reed. She was in discussion with a team of technicians. Her face was grim. She knew something was wrong, but she couldn't put her finger on it. Like a doctor who sees all the symptoms but cannot diagnose the disease. That night, I received an email from Professor Chen. Evelyn called me. She said the analysis results are very puzzling. All the parameters of material and age match, but there are still unexplainable anomalous elements. She's under immense pressure from her superiors and from Gao Qiang. She said that without concrete proof, she will have to let the auction proceed. That's when I knew. I couldn't rely on anyone else. I couldn't wait for science to provide the answer. This Hong Kong gamble, I had to be the one to turn over the cards. I called Lick. I need your help with something. I need the layout of the auction hall, the camera positions, the staff entrances. And most importantly, I need you to find a way for me to speak to Evelyn Reed for 5 minutes, just before the auction starts. The final plan was set. There was no turning back. In the art hub of Asia, under the brightest spotlights, a ghost was about to make his debut. The apartment in Kowloon became my war room. The auction hall layout provided by Lick was spread across the table. I studied it like I would the structure of an ancient piece of porcelain, looking for weaknesses, for opportunities. They have a facial recognition system at the main entrance, Lick reported. But the service entrance is less strict. Your invitation as Mr. Li Yongxin will get you into the main hall. But to execute your plan, we'll need a bit of luck. My plan was simple, and for that very reason, incredibly dangerous. I wouldn't interrupt the auction from the start. I would let it proceed. I would let Mei Ling and Gao Qiang enjoy their moment of triumph. I would let the bids climb higher and higher. The greater the excitement, the more bitter the subsequent humiliation would be. I would only act when the final item was presented, the landscape painting by Shitao. It was the piece I had spent the most effort replicating, and also the one that contained the most sophisticated signature. Mrs. Zhang, I said in our final call, everything is ready. I've sent you a package of documents through a secure channel. Inside is proof of where the real collection is stored, and my detailed testimony. If anything happens to me, release it. Be careful, Wei. Mrs. Zhang's voice was full of concern. They are cornered animals. I know, but a good restorer always knows how to handle fragile things. The night before the auction, I didn't sleep. I sat by the window, looking out at the neon lights of Hong Kong. I didn't feel fear. Instead, there was an unusual calm. Like the feeling I get before I begin restoring a priceless antique. All emotions had to be set aside. All that remained was absolute focus, the precision of every move. I prepared for my performance. I didn't need a weapon. My weapon was knowledge. I reviewed in my mind every flaw I had embedded in each piece. The air bubble in the porcelain vase, the shallow carving on the jade seal, and especially the secret of the Shitao painting. During the replication process, I had used a special ink of my own concoction for one small detail, the fisherman's boat veiled in mist. This ink, under normal light, was completely indistinguishable from ancient ink. But, when exposed to a sudden high temperature, for example, the intense light of a stage spotlight for a certain period, it would undergo a minute chemical reaction, causing its color to change from black to a dark brown. A subtle change, but one that an expert would notice immediately. That was my ace in the hole. A chemical trap set years ago. The next morning I put on the perfectly tailored suit of Li Yongxin. I looked in the mirror. A stranger looked back at me. But the eyes were still mine. Calm and full of determination. Lick came to pick me up. Everything is in place, he said. I spoke to a security guard. A little tea money convinced him to look the other way for a few minutes. Your opportunity will be when Evelyn Reed walks from her office to the stage. She always uses the service corridor to avoid the crowds. 5 minutes, I said. I only need 5 minutes. When we arrived at the Hong Kong Convention and Exhibition Center, the atmosphere was electric. Luxury cars lined up one after another. The elite of Asia were all present. Press and television crews were everywhere. Mei Ling and Gao Qiang had gotten the international debut they had always wanted. I walked into the main hall, blending into the crowd. I saw Mei Ling. radiant as a queen, accepting congratulations. I saw Gao Cheng, standing beside her, a smug smile on his face. They were on top of the world. I quietly slipped away from the crowd, heading towards the staff area. Lick signaled to me from a distance. The security guard glanced at me and gave a slight nod. The way was clear. I stood in the dimly lit corridor waiting. My heart was pounding. This was the decisive moment. If Evelyn Reed didn't believe me, if she called security, it would all be over. 5 minutes later, I heard footsteps. The door opened. Evelyn Reed appeared. She was reviewing some papers, her face tense. I stepped out of the shadows. "Dr. Reed," I said in fluent English. "I am Li Yongxin. I need to speak with you for 5 minutes. About the chateau." She looked up, startled and annoyed. "Excuse me, I'm very busy. Any questions, please?" "It's not about the painting," I interrupted her, my voice low. "It's about the ink used to paint the boat. Ask your appraisal committee if they tested its reaction to heat." Evelyn Reed's eyes narrowed. The name Li Yongxin meant nothing to her, but my question, so strangely specific and professional, struck a chord with the scholar's skepticism. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice wary. I looked her straight in the eye. "I'm the one who painted it." The storm was about to begin. Astonishment was written all over Evelyn Reed's face. She stared at me, trying to process what she had just heard. Anyone else would have probably called security immediately, but she was a scholar. Curiosity and the instinct to seek the truth prevailed. "Prove it," she said softly, her voice a challenge. "The blue and white vase," I said quickly. "Use a scanning electron microscope on the glaze on the belly of the vase, at the 3 o'clock position relative to the dragon motif. You will find an air bubble with a precise diameter of 0.02 millimeters, a flaw that a Yuan dynasty kiln could not produce, but a modern kiln can be programmed to create." She said nothing, but I saw the hesitation in her eyes. "The Liang family jade seal," I continued. "It was once broken in two. Subject it to high-intensity X-rays. You will find traces of a synthetic polymer used as an adhesive, not the animal glue used in ancient times. Why should I believe you?" "You don't have to believe me. Believe your science," I said, "and believe this." I leaned in closer. "Let the auction proceed. But when it comes to the chateau painting, have the technicians shine the stage light directly on the detail of the boat for 30 seconds at maximum intensity. Then, look at its color. You will have your answer." I stepped back. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I don't want to miss the show." I turned and walked away, leaving Evelyn Reed standing frozen in the corridor. I had given her the key. Whether to open the door was up to her. I returned to the auction hall and took my seat as Li Yongxin. The lights dimmed, and the auctioneer walked onto the stage. The show began. One by one, the items were presented. The porcelain vase, the jade seal, the jade disc, the bids soared. Numbers in the millions of Hong Kong dollars were called out, then tens of millions. I saw Mei Ling and Gao Cheng sitting in the front row, smiling with satisfaction. The whole world was witnessing their success. I glanced at Evelyn Reed, who was sitting at the experts' table beside the stage. Her face was expressionless, but I saw her occasionally signal to an assistant. She was checking what I had told her. Finally, the most anticipated item appeared. And now, the auctioneer boomed, the masterpiece of the collection. The painting, Fisherman on an Autumn River, by the great master Chateau. The painting was projected onto a large screen. The opening bid was already a staggering figure. The collectors began their battle. The bids were driven up, breaking all records. The entire room held its breath. I wasn't looking at the bids. I was looking at Evelyn Reed. She signaled to her assistant. He spoke into his walkie-talkie. Just as the bidding reached a final, unimaginable figure, the auctioneer prepared to bring down the gavel, going once, going twice. "Wait," a voice cut through the microphone. It was Evelyn Reed. She had stood up. The entire auction hall fell silent, turning towards her. Mei Ling and Gao Cheng looked at her, their expressions puzzled. "Before we conclude the bidding for this work," Evelyn said, her voice clear and decisive, "we would like to perform a final verification process right here on stage to demonstrate absolute transparency." She signaled to the technicians. An extremely powerful spotlight was aimed directly at the painting, focusing on the tiny detail of the boat in the mist. 10 seconds, 20 seconds. The smile on Gao Cheng's face began to stiffen. He realized something was wrong. 30 seconds. "Please zoom in on that detail on the screen," Evelyn requested. The camera zoomed in, and then everyone in the room saw it. The black color of the boat was slowly, but clearly, turning a dark brown. a color change that could not happen with ink that was hundreds of years old. A gasp of astonishment swept through the room. The auctioneer was speechless. Journalists started pointing their cameras at Mei Ling and Gao Qiang. Mei Ling's face turned as white as a sheet. That was when I stood up. All eyes turned to me, a stranger. I walked into the aisle, slowly approaching the stage. "The color is changing, isn't it?" I said, my voice, for the first time in months, ringing out publicly, amplified by the room's silence. "That's because it's not traditional ink. It's an organic compound I created. It's stable under normal conditions, but it oxidizes rapidly under intense heat and light." I stepped onto the stage, standing next to the painting. I turned to look at Mei Ling. Her eyes were wide with panic and disbelief as she finally recognized me. "Liang." "Wei?" she stammered. "Hello, my ex-wife," I said, my voice as cold as ice. "Your memorial service was very touching, but perhaps a little premature." The room erupted. Camera flashes went off frantically. Security guards started to move. "This painting is a fake," I declared, pointing to the work beside me. "That porcelain vase is also a fake. So is the jade seal. They are all replicas made by my own hands, a test for the greedy." I turned to Gao Qiang, who was frozen in place. "And you, Mr. Gao, conspired with my wife to stage a fraud based on a forged death certificate. I believe the Hong Kong and Shanghai police will be very interested in this story." At that moment, Ah Lik and a team of plainclothes police officers entered from a side entrance. The play was over. I looked at Mei Ling one last time. There was no arrogance left in her eyes, only complete collapse. She had lost. Lost to the ghost of the husband she had tried to erase. The chaos that followed was like a scene from a movie. Mei Ling and Gao Qiang were arrested on the spot by the Hong Kong police. The auction was cancelled. The Liang Wei legacy scandal became front-page news in every major newspaper in Asia and around the world. Antiquities expert fakes death to expose wife's conspiracy headlines like that were everywhere. My part in the story ended rather quickly. I provided a full statement to the police, along with all the evidence Mrs. Zhang had prepared. My appearance, as a living, breathing person, was irrefutable proof of their crime of forging official documents. My onstage exposure of the fake artifacts was the final nail in their coffin. The legal process took several months. Gao Qiang, with his network of crimes, was convicted of fraud, embezzlement, and several other charges related to previous business dealings that the investigation uncovered. He received a long sentence. Mei Ling, perhaps for cooperating with the authorities, received a lighter sentence, but her career and reputation were utterly destroyed. ML Gallery went bankrupt. She lost everything. I didn't feel a sense of triumph. I just felt a kind of emptiness. The war was over. Justice had been served. But the cost was a 10-year marriage, which, though rotten in its final years, had now turned to ash. I returned to Shanghai, not as a hero, but as a man who just wanted to get back to his life. I reclaimed my identity, my assets, and my family home. The first thing I did was go down to the basement and open the secret door to my workshop. Everything was just as I had left it. The scent of sandalwood, old ink, and quiet. I was home. I didn't go back to work at the museum. I needed time. I spent months just organizing the real collection, cleaning each piece, feeling the history in the palm of my hand. I reread my father's notes. In an old notebook, I found a line he had written. "The greatest value of an antique is not its beauty, but the truth of its existence. Truth always endures, no matter how it is hidden or forgotten." A year later, when everything had settled down, I received a letter. It was sent from the Shanghai women's prison. It was from Mei Ling. I was about to throw it away, but then I opened it. The letter was very short. "I don't know why I'm writing this. Perhaps to say I'm sorry, though I know it means nothing. I was blinded by ambition. I looked down on you, on your silence. I didn't realize that within that silence was a strength I could never comprehend. I lost. I wish you peace." I read the letter, then folded it. I felt no hatred, nor did I feel forgiveness. I felt nothing. She was just a part of the past, like a crack in a piece of porcelain that I had finished restoring. The crack was still there, but it no longer made the piece weak. I decided not to keep the collection for myself. My father's words echoed in my mind. Protect the history. The best way to protect history is to share it. I contacted the Palace Museum in Beijing and donated the entire Liang family collection to the state, with one condition, that it must be displayed for the public, for everyone to appreciate. As for the replicas, my spiritual children, They became a legend in the art world. Christie's kept them and occasionally displayed them in special exhibitions on art appraisal and forgery detection. They became expensive lessons. I sold the old house in Shanghai and moved to a small town near Suzhou, famous for its tranquil gardens and canals. I opened a small restoration workshop, only taking on pieces that I truly loved. My life returned to quietude. Sometimes, a new client would look at me and say, "You look familiar. I think I've seen you somewhere before." I would just smile and reply, "You must be mistaking me for someone else." Liang Wei, the man who was once declared dead, had now truly become an invisible man of his own making, not by erasure, but by choice. And in that invisibility, I finally found peace. Life in Suzhou was a symphony of tranquility. My restoration workshop was tucked away in a small bluestone alley, hidden behind a lush garden of pines and moss-covered rocks. Each morning, I woke to the sound of birdsong instead of car horns. My work was no longer a pressure, but a silent dialogue with the past. Clients came to me not because of fame, but because they heard there was a craftsman here who treated old things with the utmost respect. I had found the peace I had longed for. The past with Mei Ling and Gao Chang had become a distant story, a scar that had healed, no longer aching. I believed I had closed that door forever. But the past has a strange habit of echoing back when you least expect it. That echo came in the form of a phone call from an unknown number in London. I almost didn't answer, but some intuition urged me to. "Hello? Mr. Liang?" The voice was in English, with a hint of a British academic accent. "This is Evelyn Reed." The name pulled me back to the auction hall in Hong Kong, the head of Asian ceramics at Christie's, the woman who had believed a ghost in a corridor. "Dr. Reed," I replied, switching to English. "What a surprise. Is there something I can help you with?" "I apologize for disturbing your seclusion," she said, her tone serious. "But something has happened, and I thought you should know. It concerns one of your creations." I frowned. "Which one?" "The blue and white porcelain vase. Your replica. It was on display at a seminar on art security in London. 2 nights ago there was a break-in." "Was it stolen?" I asked, though I didn't really feel any sense of loss. "Number. That's the strange part," Evelyn continued. "The intruder disabled the security system with extreme professionalism. He managed to open the display case, but he didn't take the vase. Security discovered him while he was scanning the vase with a small handheld device. He fled, leaving no trace but a blurry camera image. I remained silent, processing the information. A thief who doesn't steal, he only studies." "We initially thought he wanted to copy it," Evelyn said. "But why go to such lengths for a replica that is already publicly known? It makes no sense." Then, one of my contacts in the art underworld mentioned a name, a legend, Mr. Long. Mr. Long? No one knows his real identity. They say he's a reclusive tycoon, a man obsessed with perfection, but he doesn't collect real artworks. He collects the most perfect replicas. He doesn't worship the artists. He worships the master forgers. To him, a replica that can fool experts is more valuable than the original. He sees it as the pinnacle of skill and intellect. A chill ran down my spine. "The intruder didn't want to steal the vase," I said slowly, piecing it together myself. "He wanted to analyze its structure. He wanted to find the maker's signature." "Precisely," Evelyn confirmed. "He wants to learn your techniques. And someone like Mr. Long, when he wants to learn about someone, he doesn't stop at one vase. Mr. Liang, I'm calling to warn you. You are no longer an anonymous man. To one person, you have become a living masterpiece to be collected." The call ended, but the silence in my workshop was now broken. I looked at the tools on my workbench, the small carving knives, the fine brushes, the jars of powdered glaze, tools of creation and restoration. But in the eyes of another, they were the tools of a dark art. I had defeated the greedy, but now I faced a different kind of enemy, one who didn't want my money or my assets. He wanted something far more valuable, my skill. He wanted to possess my mind. The echo from the past had become a warning for the future. My peace, it turned out, was just a brief interlude between 2 storms. The day Mei Ling walked out of the gates of the Shanghai women's prison, a light rain was falling. No one was there to meet her. Her once long, lustrous hair was cut short. Her face without makeup looked pale and unfamiliar. She had only a small bag with a few personal items and the meager allowance provided to her. The glamorous world of parties, art galleries, and multi-million-dollar deals had receded, leaving only a stark reality. She had spent 3 years in prison. 3 years to reflect on greed, betrayal, and her own downfall. The letter she wrote to Liang Wei had not been a tactic. It was the confession of someone who had hit rock bottom and realized the emptiness of what she had once pursued. She didn't expect forgiveness. She only wanted to be forgotten. She stood by the side of the road, watching the traffic go by, with no idea where to go. To her parents' home? They had disowned her after the scandal. Find a job? With her criminal record, she could probably only find manual labor. A cold sense of despair began to creep over her. Just then, a sleek, black, unbranded sedan pulled up silently beside her. The window rolled down, and a man in a suit and white gloves asked politely, "Miss Mei Ling?" Mei Ling took a cautious step back. "Who are you?" "I come from a friend," the man said. "My employer greatly admires your resilience. He believes everyone deserves a second chance. He invites you to come with us." Doubt battled with exhaustion in Mei Ling's heart. A stranger, a luxury car. This was too similar to the traps of the past. But she looked at the wet road ahead, at her uncertain future. What more did she have to lose? "Where are we going?" she asked. "To a new life," the man replied with a mysterious smile. She took a deep breath and got into the car. The car took her to a luxurious penthouse overlooking the Huangpu River. Everything in the apartment was exquisitely furnished. On the table was a hot meal and a set of new clothes. "Please rest," the man said before leaving. "My employer will contact you when he deems it appropriate." Mei Ling lived in that apartment for 2 days. 2 days of silent luxury, a chilling contrast to her life in prison. She didn't know if she was a guest or a prisoner in a gilded cage. On the 3rd day, a tablet on the coffee table lit up, a video call. She pressed the accept button. An elderly Asian man appeared on the screen. He was dressed in traditional silk robes, sitting in what looked like a library with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves. His face had the refined features of a scholar, but his eyes were as sharp as razors. "Hello, Miss Mei Ling," he said, his voice deep and warm. "I am the one who has admired you from afar. My name is not important. You may call me Mr. Long." Mei Ling's heart sank. That name, she had heard whispers of it. "I know what you're thinking," Mr. Long said, as if reading her mind. "But I am not like Gao Cheng. Money to me is merely a tool. I pursue something higher, perfection. And your ex-husband Liang Wei is the closest to perfection I have ever seen." He paused, observing her reaction. "I have studied him, his works. They are not replicas, they are reincarnations. He doesn't just copy the form, he copies the soul of the piece. Such a talent should not be wasted in a small workshop in Suzhou." "What do you want from me?" Mei Ling asked directly, her voice still weak. "I want to hire him. I want him to create new masterpieces for my collection." "I will pay any price," Mr. Long said. "But he is a reclusive man. He will not trust a stranger, but you. You are the one who knows him better than anyone. You know his weaknesses. You know how he thinks. I can't." "Think carefully, Miss Mei Ling," Mr. Long interrupted, his voice still gentle but laced with a threat. "I am offering you a choice. You can walk out of here and face a world that will never forgive you. Or, you can work for me. Help me get what I want, and I will give you everything you have lost. A new gallery, a new identity, a place in society. I will make you a queen of the art world again." The screen went black, leaving Mei Ling alone in the silence of the penthouse. The offer was like a venomous snake, shimmering and seductive. It promised to return everything she had lost. But she knew the price. The price was to betray Liang Wei once more, to drag him into a dangerous world he had fought so hard to escape. The pawn had just been released, and immediately it was placed on a new chessboard. The choice of the next move was its own. I was not one to sit and wait. Evelyn Reed's warning had stirred the tranquility within me, replacing it with a cold vigilance. Mr. Long, an invisible enemy, a dangerous admirer. He had studied my work. His next step would be to study me. I needed to know about him before he came for me. I contacted Ah Lik in Hong Kong through an encrypted channel. My request was clear. Find everything you can about a person nicknamed Mr. Long. He's a collector, interested in perfect replicas. While I waited, I began to fortify my defenses. Not with higher walls or stronger locks. My defense was anonymity. I changed my daily routines. I took different routes to my workshop. I paid for everything in cash. I lived like a ghost again, but this time in my own home. I also installed a few sophisticated traps around the workshop, tiny motion sensors, cameras disguised as decorative objects. A week later, Ah Lik reported back. Not much, he said, a hint of frustration in his voice. This name is like a ghost. No official records, no photos. He operates through a network of shell companies and loyal intermediaries. But there are a few rumors. They say he has a private vault somewhere near Macau where he keeps his collection. And he never appears in public. He controls everything from the shadows. An opponent who was also a ghost. This game would be played in the fog. A few days later, Mr. Long made his first move. One afternoon, a small wooden box was delivered to my workshop. The delivery man said nothing, just asked for a signature and left. The box was made of zeton wood, exquisitely carved. I scanned it for electronic devices before opening it. Inside, on a bed of yellow silk, lay a piece of raw Hetian jade. But it was no ordinary piece of raw jade. I recognized it instantly. The milky white color, with its characteristic faint green veins. This was the exact type of jade, possibly from the same boulder, that had been used to carve my grandfather's seal. This type of jade was extremely rare. Finding a piece like this was not a matter of luck. It required immense resources and determination. Beneath the jade was a small card, with a single line written in a strong, confident calligraphy. An artist should not retire. No threat, no demand, just a piece of jade and a sentence. But its message was colder than any threat. It said, "I know who you are. I know your past. I know what you are capable of doing with this. And I can find the things that are most precious to you." This was not the brute force of Gao Qiang. This was a sophisticated psychological game. He was trying to awaken the artist in me, tempting me with a perfect material. He was speaking to me in the language of craftsmanship, of art. I placed the jade on my workbench. The light hit it, creating a soft, ethereal glow. For a moment, my fingers itched to pick up my carving tools, but I held back. I knew this was a test. Mr. Long was waiting to see how I would react. If I got scared and hid, he would know I was weak. If I got angry and retaliated, he would know I was impulsive. I decided to do nothing. I placed the jade in a corner of the workshop, as if it were just an ordinary paperweight. I continued with my daily work, restoring an old porcelain plate for an elderly woman in town. I ignored his move. In a game of chess, sometimes the strongest move is to make no move at all, forcing the opponent to reveal their own intentions. But I knew this silence would not last. He had placed a piece on the board. His next move would surely be more decisive. The new game had just truly begun. And I realized a disturbing truth. This opponent didn't just understand art, he also understood me. Mei Ling sat on the penthouse balcony, looking down at the glittering lights of Shanghai. The life Mr. Long had given her was perfect on the surface. Designer clothes, fine food, a certain freedom of movement within limits. He had even set up an art consultancy firm in her name, creating the illusion of a career being rebuilt. But it was all a gilded cage, and she knew it. Every day, Mr. Long's assistant would visit, bringing books, articles, and research materials about Liang Wei. Mr. Long believes that to understand an artist, one must understand his world, the assistant would explain. She was forced to immerse herself in the world she had once tried to escape. She read about dynasties, ceramic firing techniques, the differences between types of ink. Gradually, reluctantly, she began to understand. She began to see the subtlety, the patience, the depth in the man she had once called boring. During a video call, Mr. Long asked her, "In your opinion, what is the most important thing to Liang Wei?" Mei Ling thought for a moment. Her old self would have said, his family legacy, but her current self, after all the reading and reflection, had a different answer. "The truth," she said. To him, every antique is a fragment of historical truth. Restoration is about making that truth visible again. His replications, in a way, were also to protect the original truth. He despises falsehood. Mr. Long smiled with satisfaction. Very insightful. You see, you truly do understand him. That is why you are the key. But it was that very answer that made Mei Ling realize something. Mr. Long, for all his sophistication, was just like Gao Qiang. He was building an empire based on falsehoods, on perfect replicas. He wanted to turn Liang Wei's talent, a tool for protecting truth, into a tool for creating the most beautiful lies. He wanted to corrupt the very thing Liang Wei held most dear. She remembered the letter she had written. She remembered the sense of relief she felt after confessing the truth. She realized that the new life Mr. Long promised was just a more glamorous version of the old cage. True freedom wasn't about getting back what she had lost, but about freeing herself from the desire to possess it. She made her choice. It wasn't easy. The apartment was monitored. Her phone was tapped. But 3 years in prison had taught her how to observe and be patient. She noticed that the hourly cleaning lady always left her handbag in the kitchen while she worked. One afternoon, she pretended to spill juice on her expensive dress. While the cleaning lady scurried off to get cleaning supplies, she quickly took the cheap phone from the woman's bag, went into the bathroom, and locked the door. She only had one chance. She couldn't call Liang Wei. His number would surely be monitored. She needed an intermediary, someone smart and discreet enough. Only one name came to mind: Mrs. Zhang. She found the number for Mrs. Zhang's old law firm online. Her heart pounding, she dialed. Zhang and Associates Law Office. How may I help you? A young voice answered. Please, I need to speak to Lawyer Zhang, Mei Ling said, trying to keep her voice calm. Just say, it's a former client regarding a case involving porcelain. A few seconds later, the familiar, deep, steely voice came on the line. I'm listening. Mrs. Zhang, Mei Ling whispered. It's me, Mei Ling. The other end was chillingly silent. What do you want? I don't have much time, Mei Ling said quickly. Liang Wei is in danger. There's a man named Mr. Long. He wants to force him to work for him. He's using me as bait. He's very powerful and dangerous. Please warn him, don't trust anyone who approaches him. Just then, there was a knock on the bathroom door. Miss Mei Ling, are you all right? I have to go, Mei Ling said hurriedly, then hung up, deleted the call log, and placed the phone back in the handbag, just as the cleaning lady managed to open the door. She had done what she had to do. She didn't know if Mrs. Zhang would believe her. She didn't know if she would be found out. But for the first time in years, she felt she had done something right. She had chosen truth over a gilded lie. That night, she received a text from an unknown number. It contained only 2 words. Thank you. She didn't know if the message came from Mrs. Zhang or Liang Wei. But it was enough. She had chosen her side. Not for forgiveness, but for her own salvation. Mrs. Zhang's message arrived right after Mei Ling's call. She just called. Told me about Mr. Long. Seems genuine. Be careful. The information matched what I already knew, but the source made me unable to dismiss my skepticism. Mei Ling, the person who had betrayed me most cruelly, now warning me? Was this an elaborate trap or genuine remorse? My mind was in turmoil. Part of me wanted to dismiss it as another trick, but my rational side, the restorer in me, who always seeks the truth behind the facade, told me something was different. The desperation in her voice, as relayed by Mrs. Zhang, didn't sound like an act. We need to meet her, I told Mrs. Zhang over the phone. Too dangerous, she objected. It could be a trap set by Mr. Long to lure you out. I know, but if she's telling the truth, she's our only source of information from the inside. We need to know what Mr. Long is planning. We'll meet, but on my terms. The meeting was arranged with extreme caution. Mrs. Zhang, through an anonymous communication channel, sent Mei Ling a time and place. It was a crowded public garden in Shanghai during lunch hour. I did not go. Instead, Mrs. Zhang went, sitting on a bench like an old lady resting her feet. Ah Lik and 2 of his associates, dressed as ordinary people, watched from a distance, looking for any sign of surveillance. I watched everything through a tiny camera hidden in Mrs. Zhang's brooch, which transmitted a live feed to my computer in Suzhou. Mei Ling arrived on time. She was dressed simply, looking anxious, constantly glancing around. There was no sign of a trap. Thank you for coming, Mei Ling said to Mrs. Zhang. Talk, Mrs. Zhang replied bluntly. Mei Ling told her everything. About Mr. Long's offer, his obsession with Liang Wei, his plan to use her to get to me. He thinks I understand him, Mei Ling said, her voice tinged with bitterness. The truth is, I never really did. I only saw what I wanted to see. But now, I know what he wants. He wants to turn his integrity into a tool for his own falsehoods. I can't let that happen. Through the screen, I saw the sincerity in her eyes. This was not the Mei Ling of glamorous art galleries. This was a broken person trying to piece together the remaining fragments of her self-respect. What is he planning to do next? Mrs. Zhang asked. He's losing patience. Liang Wei ignored the gift of raw jade. Mr. Long thinks a stronger push is needed. He's planning to harm someone he cares about, to force him to come out. My heart tightened. Who? I whispered to the screen. I don't know for sure, Mei Ling said. But I overheard him mention an old professor in Beijing. Professor Shen. Mr. Long hadn't just studied me. He had dug deep into my past. He had found the mentor I respected most. The meeting ended. Ah Lik confirmed that Mei Ling was not followed. She had come on her own. That night, I had a three-way call with Mrs. Jiang and Ah Lik. The situation had changed. Mr. Long had crossed a line. He was no longer playing a sophisticated mental game. He was threatening the safety of innocent people. We can't just defend forever, I said. We have to attack. What about the police? Ah Lik asked. What evidence do we have? Mrs. Jiang replied. Mei Ling's word? A piece of jade? Mr. Long is a ghost. The police can't do anything. Then we'll handle it ourselves, I said, a cold decision forming in my mind. Mr. Long wants to meet me. He wants me to work for him. Fine. I'll give him what he wants. You're insane, Mrs. Jiang said. I'm setting a trap, I explained. A trap that only a connoisseur of falsehoods like him could fall into. I will agree to create a masterpiece for him. But that masterpiece will be the very evidence that brings him down. And I'll need a messenger. Everyone understood who I was talking about. An unlikely alliance was formed. It consisted of a reclusive restoration expert, an elderly lawyer, a private investigator, and an ex-wife seeking redemption. We were an army of ghosts, preparing to confront an invisible dragon. I sent a message to Mei Ling through Mrs. Jiang's channel. Tell him, I accept.